Hi, I'm Jim Berggren, pastor at Holy Cross Lutheran Church in Houston, Texas. This is a sermon for the second Sunday after Pentecost on June the 2nd, 2024, based on Mark 2:23 through 3:6. Sabbath and the conspiracy to murder. In today's gospel, Mark lifts up two major issues strangely connected: mercy and cruelty conjoined on the same day. The Sabbath and conspiracy to judicial first-degree murder, commingling the two issues in the very holy place of worship, the synagogue, seems to be an ultimate violation of God's loving will for humanity. In practice, the Sabbath has an interesting history. It is a word for breaking off or stopping, a word for discontinuity. The ancient Semite people, pre-Judaism, pagans, believed the number 7 to be an evil number, not lucky. One didn't even say the word 7 for fear of a curse. Kind of like the 13th floor on most hospitals. There just isn't one. The seventh day was set aside as a day of fearful inactivity for those people. On that day, you stayed at home and did nothing to disturb the universe which might come back at you. That way, nothing evil could befall you. During the pagan exiles of Assyria and Babylonia, the children of Israel were amazed to discover that their captors and slave masters and torturers were largely absent on the seventh day, hiding at home, superstitiously terrified of things related to the number 7. So the Jews could worship and maintain an exile community of faith. They could Sabbath on the seventh day, unmolested. 7 became their number for perfection. As they began to record their faith journey, they used the number 7 for soaring faith statements of great beauty. For example, in 7 perfect statements describing 7 days, God creates a perfect world. And on the seventh day, God finishes his work, takes a Sabbath. Later on, as recorded scripturally, God said the Sabbath was a good place in time that we should also enjoy, a special time for us, a beautiful grace. It became a law. Enforcers of the law turned relief and grace into strictly controlled behavioral obligations. Enforcement could be arbitrary. Just on the off chance that that dear officer of the law is having a bad day, we all have them, put on your seatbelt and don't text and drive in a school zone. 1875. The ice cream soda was a year old and becoming very, very popular. In Evanston, Illinois, some church elders opposed it, believing that soda water, carbonated beverages, were intoxicating. Community leaders were pressured to make a law to forbid making or selling ice cream sodas on Sunday. A popular place, Garwood's drugstore, suffered from this new law. On Sundays, there was always a great crowd who enjoyed those sodas. So the creative fountain clerk started pouring flavored syrups over a scoop of ice cream, minus the soda water. He called the sodaless sodas Sunday sodas. They were legal. The church leaders raised objections to a frivolous dessert being named after the Sabbath. So Garwood's drugstore responded by changing the spelling to Sundae, ice cream sundae. Sabbath restrictions are called blue laws. The Emperor Constantine prohibited Sunday labor in AD 321. The practice arrived in America with the Jamestown colony, which restricted secular activities on Sundays. In 1619, businesses were to be closed, penalties severe. Over the years, it was modified. Even at the late 70s in Houston, many businesses routinely closed on Sunday or at least one day a week. Sage Drugs was closed on Saturday to celebrate the Sabbath. Eckert's was closed on Sunday. Even today, liquor stores are closed on Sundays in Houston and in many places. Understandings about Sabbath behavior were unwritten rules. In my home congregation, not everyone felt the same way about them. One of my beloved Sunday school teachers counseled that one should not eat breakfast on Communion Sundays because the food and drink would dilute the effects of the body and blood of Christ. That idea just did not make sense to a 16-year-old boy in a constant state of starvation. Always a faithful church leader, nevertheless, Dad would stare down anyone who objected to after-church behavior that might be considered frivolous fun. Nobody was willing to argue with him about dropping me off at the skating rink for 4 hours on Sunday afternoons in the winter, or at the swimming pool on Sunday afternoons in the summer. The Pharisees don't want to seem petty here, but they're going to have to stop this Rabbi Jesus from gathering crowds and being so popular. Aha! They'll do it legally. There are enough Sabbath laws on the books to justifiably bust him for a variety of Sabbath infractions. Just a heads up here, I think it might be a sin to use Sabbath law to punish people. Punishing is hard work that doesn't measure up to godly rest and worship. The Pharisees focus on a walk through a field. Now, they could have busted Jesus on the distance restriction of walking farther than 2,000 cubits on the Sabbath. But they went for the harvesting restriction instead, because it was easier to prove. Dad had one farmstead, and Grandpa had another. They were mostly adjacent. Dad and I walked to Grandpa's house through the fields. It was about a mile. We plucked early summers the wheat heads and crushed those seeds of grain into our hands to see how ripe and close to harvest it was. A handful of wheat seeds, chewed thoroughly and not swallowed, changed into a healthy gum in your mouth, nutritious and sugar-free. Actually, it was the only gum I was ever allowed. Late summer, we walked through the cornfields and pulled ears off the stalks to check for ripeness and insects. Shuck the corn husks and clean off the corn silk, and you're eating the raw, sweet, natural food that God made. I'd load up a gunny sack of corn for Mom to cook. It wasn't work. It was gratitude. It was worship. Every day is a holy day. The Pharisees gave up on the charges of farming on the Sabbath. Plan B. Jesus heals people. Let's invite old withered hand John inside the door of the congregation. At the synagogue, if Rabbi Jesus fixes his hand, we got him. We'll have him dead to rights on Exodus 31:14 and 15. Everyone who profanes the Sabbath shall be put to death. 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 Whoever does any work on the Sabbath day shall be put to death. How cruel. To use a man with a disability who probably doesn't even know what's going on, who is barred from even being in the room. He's in the back because of his disability. He's not allowed to come all the way in and fully participate in worship because he's damaged goods. unclean. He's been coerced by the rabbis, and he's anticipating some kind of severe punishment. Jesus saw what's going on. First, he calls a man all the way into the worship area where he doesn't belong, totally offending the Pharisees. And then he nails them with hard questions. Are we supposed to hurt and harm people on the Sabbath? Are we supposed to kill people on the Sabbath? Funny, I didn't get that memo. Jesus is angry. What does that look like? Poor old withered hand John is standing there, about as uncomfortable as anyone could get. He's in the wrong place. He wasn't asking for anything. He's an innocent bystander, victim of the Pharisees' manipulations. He's trying to obey the rabbis. And now the spotlight is on him, and in a place where he's an outcast because of his condition. If he could have sunk into the floor, he would have gladly done so. He's withered. And Jesus tells him to do the very thing that he's completely incapable of doing. Stretch out your hand. Okay. It worked. Pharisees, plan C. Call in the Herodians. Pharisees, they hate Herodians. Herodians support the most vicious enemy, Rome. We want to overthrow Rome. But we and the Herodians share a common hatred of Jesus and a fear of his growing popularity. Vicious political enemies, they can unite in a plot to kill Jesus. Conspiracy to commit first-degree judicial murder. Hey, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, temporarily. This is on the Sabbath. Not nice. Why would somebody use the third commandment as an excuse to break the fifth commandment? What a horrible situation has been set up here. Uniting with pagan allies in rebellion against God to persecute Jesus and his followers is probably not keeping the Sabbath. The Sabbath is God's gracious gift to us. It's specific and wonderful, not to be diminished by the barnacles of merciless human law. The Sabbath is meant to be a time of gratitude and praise, a demilitarized zone. I can think of no other community in the world that is a community of praise. We assemble to raise our voices in absolute gratitude, humble gratitude. Take a Sabbath every week, straight from God's mouth to your ear. This Sabbath is for you. Take Sabbaths every day, every waking hour. Stop for 8.5 minutes to take a Sabbath. Your work and your health will be better for it. Take a Sabbath. Stop and remember who you are, who God is, who we all are, and what is really important. God's gift is just what we need. Amen.